Former Defense Secretary, CIA Leon Panetta unloaded on President Obama in his new book, Worthy Fights. An excerpt in Time magazine has Panetta directly blaming President Obama for the collapse in Iraq. Panetta wrote, quote, "The White House coordinated the negotiations but never really led them. Without the president's active advocacy, al-Maliki was allowed to slip away. To this day, I believe that a small U.S. troop presence in Iraq could have effectively advised the Iraqi military on how to deal with al-Qaeda's resurgence and the sectarian violence that's engulfed the country." Also today on Fox News, former President George W. Bush, before leaving office, warned strongly against withdrawing U.S. troops from Iraq. He said America has since learned the lesson that Iraqis are not yet capable of providing for their own security. Joining us now is Jasser. He is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, author of the book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam. Also with us, Danielle Pletka, senior vice president for Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Great to have you both with us. Zuri, if I may start with you, and to hear Leon Panetta come down on the president like this is extraordinary. Your thoughts?
Well, it's not unexpected. I mean, we left a vacuum in Iraq, and to say that, well, this could not have been prevented. I mean, all they needed was continued adult supervision, as this military has still old factions of the Sunni Ba'athists that want to see Iraq fall apart as it's been Shia controlled. So the sectarianism is unroofing itself because we left them unmonitored, unchaperoned, then it wouldn't have needed that much. So it's not a surprise to see former administration folks and others speaking up and saying, you know, this was really, we were MIA.
Tens of billions of dollars, though, 8 years, and the United States could not stand up an army of Iraqis. I mean, what is the magic number? How many tens of billions would it take? How many decades would it take?
Well, I can tell you, as being someone who has family in Syria and knowing what happens after generations of Baathism and just severe oppressive dictatorship, you can't just turn the lights on and have a moderate military. I mean, it's going to take a moderate education, generations of infusion of liberalism, institution, civil society building. We left troops in Korea and Germany and Japan. I mean, this is not something that could get fixed in 5 to 10 years.
Danielle, your thoughts as we look at what is unwinding here. The fact is Turkey's parliament has at least given Erdogan the permission to join the coalition if he so chooses and to join the fight against the Islamic State. That looks like first hint of real progress in the region. What do you make of it?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that there is some reason to be hopeful. Clearly, it will be helpful if we get the Turkish on board. Clearly, it will be helpful if the Turkish allow us to use our bases in southern Turkey, which they've forbidden us to use so far, as part of this fight against ISIS. But I think that the other part of the problem is that the Turks really aren't all in against some of the Sunni Islamist groups. They're focused on only the Kurds. They're focused only on the PKK. That was the only group that was actually mentioned in the parliamentary discussion. And that's part of the problem, is that I'm not sure we have the same aims as the Turks do in Syria and Iraq.
Zerdy, do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And the part that I think people should remember is the AKP, that's the ruling party in Turkey, are Islamists. They're the Muslim Brotherhood of Turkey. So ultimately, they're going to want to be on the side of the jihadists. Now, ISIS is giving the Islamic State ideology a bad name. But remember, the secularists and the military in Turkey, this is why Turkey's position is so fascinating. The secularists military in Turkey were pro-Assad back in the 20th century for decades. So they're really probably, as they see their border getting more and more closer to ISIS and some interplay there, they're probably pushing Erdogan to do something. And he's probably going to pull a Qatar where basically he has some jets there, but he won't drop any bombs. And he's still on the side of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the Islamists in Syria.
And meanwhile, we're watching the United States now, after entry against the Islamic State. We're now doing Iran's work, supporting, in effect, Bashar al-Assad, which is obviously the proxy for Iran, protecting Iraq, which is Shia-run and led by, from a distance, Tehran. What possible sense can the U.S. involvement here make, Danielle?
Well, first of all, I really don't see your characterization of this in the same way, Lou. We're not doing Iran's bidding. ISIS represents a threat to us and to our allies in the Middle East, whether it's the Gulf or it's Israel. I also don't think that the Iraqi government is fairly said to be run by Iran, although Iran has been the only game in town for them since we pulled out. The problem for us is, as you rightly said, Assad, the problem for us is that we don't have a strategy. We still don't have an overarching mission in the region that actually will deal with the problems. If you want to talk about Iran, then you also have to talk about getting rid of Assad, their little puppet in Syria. And we are only addressing
wait a minute.
the Islamic State and part of Al-Qaeda.
A little puppet sitting in Damascus and Baghdad is not under the influence of Iran equally.
Well, I think that Baghdad has been under Iranian influence. No, I think that it's a very fair question, and I think part of the problem that we've seen is after we pulled troops out of Iraq, we had government, we had a vacuum, as Zufti rightly described, and the Iranians had an enormous amount of influence, and we gave away all of our influence. In Syria, Assad is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Iranian government. He is their only ally in the Middle East, and that is why they've been working so hard to prop him up. All
right. Danielle, thank you very much. Zuhdi, very quickly.
Yeah, and what we need is a new paradigm, a third pathway away from the old Arabism versus Islamism or the Shia-Sunni divide into a third pathway with a vision in the Middle East for freedom and liberty, which is possible if we had leaders with vision.
You know, I heard a lot of that from 2001 to throughout. I haven't seen it manifested anywhere. Who's going to bring that vision?
It needs follow through. It needs a believer before it can be done.
It's a vision in search of a mind and a heart. I take it. Zuhdi, thank you very much. Danielle, thank you both.